I would like to welcome a very special guest to our Trumpet Symposium in the Atelier in Hamburg, here, Bob Malone.
Thank you for inviting me, Thomas, and it's an honor for me to be here. I've been here several times before, but I have to say you did a wonderful job with extending summer this time so that we had great weather, and the participants will get to enjoy that as well as all of the great things that we'll talk about during this week. I'm looking forward to it.
This will be very special because we will have about 25 people from all European countries, and technicians, especially brass technicians, will join this symposium. So I would like to talk with you a bit about the presentation we do for these technicians there, and therefore I really would like to understand what is your background in the world of trumpet modifications, of lead pipes, this kind of things.
Sure. I think to start with, I was a trumpet player, and my dream was to play in a symphony orchestra, and that's what I studied. I was very fortunate to study with some great teachers along the way, and one of those, perhaps the most important person in my life musically, is Thomas Stevens. At the time, the principal trumpet of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And he came to teach at my university, the University of Southern California. And I auditioned, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen as one of his students. Little did I know at that time what that would mean to me for my career now and what I'm doing now as a designer.
How did this lead into the trumpet building world, in the technical world?
Well, it actually started because I needed a part-time job. You know,
okay.
As a young trumpet player, I was getting some work, but not enough to pay all of my bills. And one of my roommates in college worked for a very well-known brass repair and design technician named Larry Minich. And Larry Minich is probably most known by trombone players. He was working for another company at the time, designing trombones for them. And he came up with a lot of unique things that trombone players take for granted now, like open wrap, and he was famous for doing his conversions, Minich conversions.
Right. Yes, I think even Roger Bobo built part of his tubas with Larry Minich.
Well, yes.
That's where I remember the name of Larry Minich.
Of course, if you remember, Roger
technician.
Bobo had that bass French horn.
Yes.
Larry Minich built that bass French horn.
That's right.
So,
yes.
In fact, when I first came into his shop, he had car parts hanging from the walls because he was, in addition to being a very great designer and brass technician, he was very passionate about old cars, and he had a hot rod, and he was redoing that hot rod. So when I first met him, his car was in pieces, all over the shop as well.
Okay.
But I met him through one of my roommates in college, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure why he hired me because I had no experience, but fortunately he did.
He saw the talent in you.
He's something, I don't know, but I'm so glad that happened, and I started to learn the craft as an apprentice through him.
Mm-hmm. And of course you were related to trumpet playing at the time, so from your own experience studying with Tom Stevens. And,
sure.
Did that lead you also in the way you used your talent into lead pipes and
sure.
modifications of trumpets?
Yeah, it really started out with me trying to improve my own trumpets. And as I became more skilled and could work with brass instruments with more authority, maybe, I began to study ways to improve my trumpets, and I looked at my C trumpet at the time, very common setup, but also one that had a lot of problems with intonation and color changes and things like that. So that started really a study of how I could fix these things, and I focused on lead pipes. And so in the beginning, it was studying other manufacturers' lead pipes. I found every taper I could find, and I measured it, I tested them, I took very careful notes on what I found. And one of the things that I had an idea of was some of the common problem notes on a C trumpet being flat, E flat, E flat, D in that register, I thought could be related to a jump in bore from the end of a traditional C trumpet lead pipe into the bore of a large bore trumpet, and there was quite a jump. And so I started experimenting with that, and I did find that if you made the lead pipe longer and you made a reverse style lead pipe, it did improve the intonation on, on those notes, and that started. The next transition was finding the best tapers to use, and in the beginning I used 2 different companies' tapers and started modifying them. That's when the unique feature that you see on Malone style MC1 lead pipe, for instance, that's on the Chicago artist model trumpet, has that oversleeve on the end.
Yes.
The reason that that's there is because that was my solution for putting the bell brace in the proper position. Because if you have a reverse lead pipe and the top tube is moving, the only way you could really mount it would be to move the brace further back on the bell, and that created other problems.
Which was not good,
right,
yeah, for
exactly.
the
So
sound.
I said, okay, well, why don't I put an extra tube there, and I can have a place to mount the brace and keep it in the right spot. That's how that started.
I know that one of our friends, Japanese friend, Kenzo Kawasaki, you met him also quite early at that time, and was he also related to this development of parts, or I know you met him and you did a couple of things with him?
Well, to sort of continue the story and how that involves Kenzo, as I was making these lead pipes using these other manufacturers' tapers, I still wanted more improvement. And I had an idea in mind of what an ideal taper would look like to further improve the intonation and response and make the color more even throughout the register. And that's when I decided to make my own lead pipe. And I should have brought it with me, but just on a simple piece of note paper, I charted out what the measurements would be.
Okay.
And I made the mandrel. And I did it very old school, where you machine a cylindrical section and it's stepped, and it's stepped all the way through. And then carefully filing it to blend those areas together. And that's how I did that. And so the MC1 lead pipe, the number 1 taper, that's how that was created. And
that's still a taper we keep until today, right?
That is a taper that we use today.
Today, yes.
Exactly. And that lead pipe taper has been used successfully by players for quite a long time now. It's become kind of a famous pipe. So, but the interesting story that went with that was the material that I used. And when I ordered it, after I made the mandrel, I made a mistake. And I ordered material that was a little thick. It was really thicker than any tube that had ever been used to make a lead pipe before. I thought, well, okay, I can at least try some pipes and I can see what the intonation curves would be like and see how that would turn out. So I developed a process to prepare the tubes to be able to draw them into a lead pipe. And so in the beginning, if people would go back and find my old pipes, you notice on the receiver that it would say MC1, but on the other side, it would say HW. Mm-hmm. And so heavyweight, because the tube was so heavy, and I wanted to stamp them that way. So in the beginning, I made pipes that were heavyweight and medium weight and lightweight, but soon the preference was the heavyweight pipe, and so I didn't make the other weight difference, the other tubes very often at all, but mostly the heavy ones, but I still kept stamping HW on it. That's how that started. So the next evolution of the lead pipe was finding that a lot of people enjoyed the MC1, and I had good success with that, but there were some players that it wouldn't satisfy. And so I had another idea for a second pipe that became the number 2 taper, so MC2, and made that mandrel the same way, same old school way. But I had the idea that I needed a pipe where it would feel to the player like there was a little more room, a little broader, a little more open feel. And so I had the idea of how I could achieve that by making the taper open a little more quickly than the MC1, and then control the taper in the back so that it didn't open up quite as much. And my educated guess turned out to be correct, and that MC2 lead pipe was enjoyed very much by those players who found the number 1 taper to be not quite for them. Mm-hmm. So Kenzo Kawasaki, well, first of all, let's go back to Tom Stevens, because again, I said Tom Stevens and Larry Minich were very important people to me. As I was developing these lead pipes, Tom would come into the shop and I would show him my experiments. And soon he liked what I was doing, and at a point I started modifying his trumpets and putting those pipes on them, and he would test them in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And I did several trumpets that way. And Tom, because he was an international personality, and he had friends all over the world, Pierre Thibault, Bo Nielsen. There was this whole group of international, highly acclaimed trumpet players. And he introduced me to those players. And I quickly was able to meet many influential, high-level trumpet players kind of early on in my career. And that's what attracted the attention of Yamaha and Kenzo Kawasaki.
Right.
And so that's how Kenzo got involved. And in fact, before we started working together, my first experience with Kenzo was when he came into Larry Minich's shop with the very first what would become the Zeno trumpet. At the time was called the heavy wall trumpet.
Heavy wall trumpet,
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I know we'll hear the story of how all of that went, but I had a chance to see the very first pre-production samples of the heavy wall trumpet when Kenzo came, and I think Hiro Okabe came as well, and they were going through the U.S. showing these trumpets to important players, orchestral players throughout the U.S. And they came into Los Angeles and made an appointment to show Tom Stevens and the rest of the members of the orchestra. And they traveled on to Boston, and they showed them to the Boston Symphony players. That's a great story as well. But after the testing was done, one of those trumpets came back, and that trumpet was used in the LA Philharmonic for several years and adopted by Don Green, who used it for much of his career playing principal trumpet after Tom Stevens had left the orchestra. So that was my first introduction to Kenzo. He came in specifically to see me at one point because Yamaha was working hard to gain credibility with the American players, and I think he saw the relationships that I'd built with Tom Stevens and with other important players, including Håkan Hardenberger. And he asked if I would be willing to help him with some projects. And so the project that we worked on first was building a C trumpet for Håkan Hardenberger. And we worked together on that, and another of his colleagues came, Toshi Kamiyama, who's also a wonderful...
Famous Atelier stuff also, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And Håkan came to Los Angeles, and he was playing his first concert in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Bowl, and he spent time in my shop, and we worked on this trumpet together. I mean, it was the first time that Kenzo and I really had worked together.
Okay.
And I owe Kenzo a lot to my career. He taught me a lot of things. He had an incredible work ethic. We would start early in the morning and we finished, late into whatever it took to do the job, and figure it out. And he taught me annealing techniques. There were a lot of things that he showed me. So it was kind of, for me, a second apprenticeship in some ways, early on, because of that. But he and I have been friends for many, many years now, and have then, after that, we worked on several projects together. The 6310Z, the Z trumpet with Bobby Shu. We did that project together and built the prototype in my shop and did testing with Bobby, and that's how that started. I developed another trumpet for Yamaha called the Mike Vax model, which was out for a while. So I became a
This
dealer.
was even before you joined Yamaha,
Yes,
right?
before, of course. And I became a dealer for Yamaha. I was a specialty dealer. This is going to be interesting for this session,
yes.
because these technicians are coming from specialty dealers,
Yes.
and so on. And that's where I came from. And so that was the beginnings of my history in working with Yamaha, even before I was an employee of Yamaha. And that's...
Yes, I remember we have met also during some activities here in Germany. Some
Actually,
festivals.
I should tell that story because, yes.
We have met because
Yes.
you have sent some instruments to Europe and they got destroyed on the
Yes,
way
they
here,
did,
so we had to
unfortunately.
repair them here in Germany, which was our first contact. And
It was?
I remember it well. It was
1991 in Bremen.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the Bremen trumpet
And
days.
so it continued into, you becoming a member also of the Yamaha family finally. Yeah. And for me, it's also interesting to see how your lead pipes, how we develop them into our instruments. Yes, the first part was Kenzo and trials on the first heavy wall trumpets. But I mean, finally, we are building the Chicago model and the New York model with your lead pipes,
Right.
MC1 and
Right.
MC2.
That, when I joined Yamaha in 2001, it's hard to believe it's been 15 years now. It's gone by quickly. But I moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where Yamaha had a plant called Yamaha Musical Products. And we built a custom shop there, and that's where I worked out of. But when I joined Yamaha, I had a very good relationship with John Hagstrom of the Chicago Symphony. And in fact, John, I think had just not too long before then had won the second trumpet job. He had joined the orchestra, I think, as a utility third trumpet player, and then he eventually became the second trumpet player. He's also been the longest standing second trumpet player in that orchestra. He's been playing that position for a long time now. But I had been working with him since he was a student at Eastman, and built a number of instruments for him that he used to win auditions. So it became natural when I moved to Grand Rapids, which was only a three-hour drive from Chicago,
Yes.
that we should find a project that we could work on together. And so the idea that came out of that, we didn't know it would be called the artist model at the time. The idea was, since I'd become known for conversions, Malone conversions on these trumpets, why don't we come up with just a factory-made version, so that rather than people having to buy a new trumpet and then send it to me and take it apart and modify it, let's just design it so that anybody could go to a store and they could buy it in silver plate and whatever finish they wanted, and with a case and everything. And so that's how that started. And of course, since my lead pipes work so well, we knew with the Yamaha trumpets, we continued to use them, and they of course became adopted for use in the artist model trumpets, the Chicago and New York. The parts are used in the piccolo trumpets now, and yeah, so that's how that started.
Yeah, it's a long career, and it's a lot of really exciting moments also with a lot of world-class players all around the world. Yeah. So where do you see what's coming next? So on which projects you're working right now in America?
Well, yeah, with the great thing about Yamaha is development never truly stops. It's the philosophy of Kaizen, which is continuous improvement. So when, of course, we finish a development project and we're working with a development player and they're 100% satisfied, and we know we've created a new model that will be successful because of that, and it goes into production and people can buy it, we don't just stop thinking about it. We are continuously thinking about how can we make things better. So since the first artist model came out, the first Chicago, we of course have continued to think about how we could make it better and better. And I can't tell you all the secrets, you know, some of them, all of them too, but we've come up with some very exciting new ideas. I can say that when I joined Yamaha, I had a pretty good working knowledge of how certain things worked. What I've learned since joining Yamaha and since working with you, Thomas, and my other colleagues, it's allowed me to grow as a designer. And it's very exciting. It's why I'm still excited, even after having done this for so many years. Each day is a new possibility to learn something new. And what we're able to do is to bring these new ideas into these instruments. So I can just say, there are some very exciting things that will be coming and being incorporated into the instruments of the future, the trumpets of the future, that I think are going to just keep the improvements going. As good as they are, and they're fantastic, I have no doubt that we'll be able to make them even better as years go on.
Yeah, this is for me also is one of these things that it never stops. It always, every day something new is coming, some new, well, even sometimes secrets we're discovering, and that makes it so exciting to work, especially on trumpets. So for me also, great project, and always a great pleasure to work with you, Bob.
No, it's been
good to have you here for this symposium. and I think we will present a good thing to our guests here.